back with comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. Sometimes I forget how much shit I'll be in if my wife ever starts listening to this podcast properly. But I was reminded today, so we weren't doing anything today, and I thought, fuck it, for a treat, I'll let my wife listen to an episode of my other podcast, The Oppression Chamber, the latest episode that's out. It's called Dumpster Fire, because she asks sometimes to listen, and I always say, no, you won't like this episode. I'll tell you an episode you'll like. And the latest episode of Dumpster Fire, we had an Indian comedian on, and we talked about India for a little while, so I was like, oh, maybe you can listen to this one. It's a good episode, and Dhruv shits on Gandhi, and you don't like Gandhi. So I was like, it's a win-win. She'll enjoy it. There's Indian. It's sweet. But I had forgotten that within the first 5 minutes of that episode, I was raving about how beautiful Ethiopian women are and how they are possibly the most beautiful women in the entire world. How they've got like the whole package. They've got like a whitey facial structure with beautiful skin, booty. Their hair's fucking beautiful. They are fantastic looking ladies. And there's nothing necessarily wrong about saying that. It's really just an observation. The problem is where I came up with my theory about Ethiopian women being beautiful. It was a few days before I did that podcast at an Ethiopian restaurant with my wife. That's where the problems begin, because she was like, fuck, is that what you were doing that day? I thought you were just tired and maybe a little bit sick because you didn't speak for like 25 minutes. I thought you were dazed. And I was dazed. I was dazed and dazzled by the Ethiopian women's beauty. And it wasn't the Ethiopian women in the restaurant. It was the Ethiopian women on the TV in the restaurant. They were playing some Ethiopian pop music. And these dudes were just surrounded by like fucking 10 or 12 fucking Queen of the Nile princesses. And I just could not stop watching that fucking TV. So the podcast keeps going. She's kind of yelling at me a little bit. I'm not even listening to what she's saying because in my head, I'm starting to go through a big, long Rolodex of the shit I've said on here that is 1,000 times worse than the Ethiopian shit. Not only on this one, I've said some bad shit on the other one too. And while she's yelling at me, I'm doing some quick equations. I'm like, all right, Ethiopians are hot equals this much yelling. All right, I've said stuff at least 20 times worse than the Ethiopian shit. What is 20 times this much yelling? That's a big fight, but I'm sure there's stuff in here I've forgotten about that is more than 20 times worse than Ethiopians are hot. I think there's some big trouble in this podcast. But what I'm going to say to her now is, you can't listen to the podcast. It will compromise my artistic integrity. And she'll be like, you have no integrity. And I'm like, that's exactly right. And that's what the people want. Someone with no integrity at all. And if you're listening all the time, that is going to be in the back of my head, and I'll turn into someone that is pretending to have some integrity. I'll start pulling punches. I might as well stop the podcast now. Is that what you want? Yes. Well, it's not happening. No matter what you want, it's not happening. So yeah, I just got to brace myself for the inevitable. I'm going to have a lot of explaining to do eventually. But anyway, that's that, and this is Fucked Up Friday. So for the newbies, Fucked Up Fridays is when a listener who can barely spell sends in a story of one of their fucking big nights out, a fucking bender, a fucked up story. I read it out on a Friday, you listen on a Friday, take some inspiration and have a good weekend. So if you would like to send in one of your Fucked Up Friday stories, just hit me up on social media. I am Boyle Comedy on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Or, alternatively, you can just email me now. I'm enjoying the emails. They're easier to reply to. And the email is just boylecomedy@gmail.com. That's it. So here is this week's Fucked Up Friday story. It was Australia Day this week, so we've got a classic Australian banger from a classic Australian named Barry. Thanks for sending in the story, Barry, and here we go. This week's Fucked Up Friday. About 10 years ago, we had a mate's bucks party out on a cruise boat in the river. It was fucking wild. Hey, you don't need to add the "it was fucking wild" part. We'll be the judge of that. That's like when people say the funniest thing happened to me and you listen to their story and you just want to punch them in the face for wasting your time. So we pretty much took over this shit. We threw all the cups and the cutlery overboard, plus the barbecue, the gas bottle, pretty much anything that wasn't bolted down, we threw overboard. The guy serving the piss, for those of you who aren't experts in Australian slang, he's talking about the bartender. So the guy serving the piss ended up being so shit scared, he let us work behind the bar. We were handing out piss left, right and center. We'd been on the water for probably 2 hours and this boat was a fucking total wreck. A bigger mate of mine tried to climb on the roof and he fell through into the shitter. This was the final straw for the captain and he took us straight to shore. We still had a few hours to kill before the strippers arrived at a mate's house, so we boozed on at the local. We drank there for a while and the time had come to see some titties. Show us your fucking titties. Titties. So it was time to see some titties and the lads were on for it. So we got 2 maxi taxis. One of the maxi taxis was a disabled one and that was the one I was in. So myself and one of my looser mates, I don't know whether that is meant to be looser or loser. I don't think it matters. Either way, it's the same. So myself and one of my looser/loser mates ended up in the back of the disabled bit. He pulled out his cock and started hosing all through the back of the cab. He then looks me in the eyes and says, "Touch it. I dare you to touch it." No, he didn't say that. He looks me in the eyes and he says, "Bet you can't beat that." Never one to back down from a challenge, I replied, "I bet you I can," and proceeded to undo my pants, squatted, and dropped a splattered shit all through the back of the cab. There is a lot of fucking people out there whose go-to move when they get fucked up is to shit. I had no idea until I started doing this podcast how common just shitting was. Shitting wasn't the play there. You should have jerked off. Shitting's too common. If you just whipped out your dick and started jerking off and came all over the back window, that would have been the boss move. That would have fucking blown your mate away. So we were in stitches in the back. The rest of the cab was dry reaching out the windows and another mate threatened to beat my head in. We couldn't stop laughing as the cabbie drove off into the distance. We all went inside and looked at OK titties. OK titties? You should be glad you're seeing any titties ever. You're a guy that shits in the back of a fucking maxi taxi. Anyway, the next day, the owner of the boat and the cabbie were on to my mate who organised the bucks. They claimed we did $2,500 damage to the boat, which I had to pay a quarter of, and the cabbie charged $600 for the cab clean, which I had to pay, but my mate never ratted on me. So what's that? You had to pay about $1,200 to take a shit, fuck up a boat, and see some OK titties. That is a solid Australian bucks. That is the archetypical Australian bucks party. They all follow a very similar pattern with different variations, different bodily fluids, and different damage to property. So thanks to the Australia Day special. Thanks for sending it in. That's it from me tonight. Enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you the fuck later.